Christmas is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. We think of warm fireplaces, family gatherings, and safety. But for some, um, the holidays are a time of isolation, vulnerability, and darkness. The heavy snow muffles the screams. The festive lights hide the shadows. And sometimes, the person knocking on your door isn't there to spread holiday cheer. Tonight, I'm going to share three true, terrifying stories that took place during the Christmas season. These aren't stories about Santa Claus or miracles. These are stories about home invasions, deception, and the monsters that wear human faces. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, double check them, and let's get into it. I had been single for 3 months, and the loneliness was starting to feel like a physical weight. My ex-boyfriend had moved out in September, taking most of the furniture and all of the warmth from the apartment. By the time December rolled around, I was spending every night sitting on my floor, scrolling through dating apps, just to feel some connection to the outside world. That's when I matched with Evan. His profile was like a breath of fresh air. He was a software engineer, 28 years old, with kind eyes and a brown-haired husky named Roy. His bio said he loved hiking in the Pacific Northwest and made pasta from scratch. We hit it off immediately. For 2 weeks, he was the first thing I thought of when I woke up, and the last person I texted before bed. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. When I told him I was feeling like a Grinch and hadn't put up a single decoration, he immediately offered to help. "I've got extra lights and a ton of ornaments," he texted. "I'll bring pizza. We can make your place look like the North Pole, Saturday?" It seemed sweet, harmless. I was desperate for company, so I said yes. That Saturday, I actually put effort into my appearance. I cleaned the apartment, put on real jeans instead of my usual sweatpants, and even applied a little makeup. I wanted to feel normal again. He was supposed to arrive at 7:15, the doorbell rang. I remember checking my reflection in the hallway mirror one last time, smiling, and swinging the door open. But the man standing on my porch was not Evan. My smile froze. The man in the doorway was wrong. He had the same general build as Evan, maybe, but he looked at least 10 years older. He was gaunt, his skin pulling tight over his cheekbones like he hadn't eaten in weeks. His eyes were wide, bulging slightly, darting around nervously. He was holding a plastic bag from Dollar Tree, not the pizza box Evan had promised. "Evan?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "Hey, I know. I look different, right?" He laughed, but the sound was dry and hollow. "I've been traveling for work non-stop. Stress, I dropped like 30 pounds. Those photos on my profile are from 2 years ago, back when I had the dad bod." He looked at me expectantly. "Can I come in? It's freezing out here." My gut was screaming at me. Every instinct I had said slam the door. But I was polite. I was conditioned not to be rude. And his explanation, "Well, people use old photos on apps all the time, right?" "Yeah, sure," I stepped back. "Come in." That was the mistake that almost cost me my life. He walked into my apartment slowly. He didn't take off his shoes. He just started wandering around, touching things. He ran his fingers along the back of my sofa, picked up a framed photo of my family and stared at it for way too long. "Nice place," he muttered. He didn't sound like the Evan I had been texting. That Evan was witty and articulate. This man mumbled and seemed jittery, his hands constantly moving, twitching at his sides. I stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, trying to keep a distance. "So, where's the pizza?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He blinked, like he had forgotten the lie. "Oh, the place was closed." Crazy, right? A pizza place closed on a Saturday. He turned to face me, and then he looked past me, down the hallway toward my bedroom. He took a step closer. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. He said, his voice dropping an octave, "I like these old buildings. The walls are so thick. You really can't hear anything between the apartments. You could scream, and nobody would know." My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought he could hear it. I forced a tight smile. I just remembered I left the space heater on in my bedroom. "Let me go check it." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked, forcing myself not to run down the hallway. As soon as I crossed the threshold of my bedroom, I slammed the door and locked it. "Hey," he shouted from the living room. His voice wasn't jittery anymore. It was angry. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the device. "There's a man in my house," I whispered into the phone, tears streaming down my face. "He's not who he said he was. I think he's going to hurt me." Thump, he was at the bedroom door. He didn't knock. He just turned the knob. When it didn't open, he didn't ask me to let him in. He started laughing, a low, rhythmic chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Leah, open the door, Leah." Then came the impact. He threw his body against the door. The wood splintered. The frame rattled. I knew the lock wouldn't hold. The police wouldn't make it in time. I looked at the window. I threw it open and jumped into the freezing night. I landed hard, rolling onto the cold ground, and ran to my neighbor's house. The police arrived 10 minutes later with guns drawn. They kicked down my front door, but the apartment was silent. He was gone. But what he left behind still keeps me awake at night. He had ransacked the place in those few minutes. My underwear drawer was empty. He had taken everything. And on the white wall of my living room, written in a dark, dripping substance, was a message. "Merry Christmas, Leah." The police tested it. It was human blood. But here's the kicker. It wasn't his blood, and it wasn't mine. The DNA didn't match anyone in the system. They never found him. The profile disappeared. The phone number was a burner. To this day, I wonder whose blood was on my wall, and if he's currently messaging another lonely girl, offering to help hang Christmas lights. I don't remember Christmas as a time of joy. I remember it as a time of survival. I was 9 years old. My parents had split up a year prior. A nasty divorce that sent my dad to Arizona and left me with my mom. But mom wasn't really mom anymore. She was a shell, filled with cheap vodka and bad decisions. We lived in a second-floor apartment on the east side of the city. It was the kind of place where the hallways smelled of mildew and stale smoke, and you learned quickly not to make eye contact with the neighbors. That Christmas Eve, the heat had been shut off. Mom hadn't paid the bill. She was passed out on the living room rug. Her boyfriend, Ray, was in the recliner by the window. His head lolled back, a needle sitting on the table next to him. The apartment was freezing. I was wearing my winter coat, sitting on the floor, watching the static on the TV. I hadn't eaten since school lunch the day before, and school was out for break. The fridge contained a jar of pickles and sour milk. Around 8 o'clock p.m., a knock echoed through the apartment. We never had visitors. Mom's friends just walked in. Debt collectors banged on the door. This was a polite, rhythmic knock. I walked to the door, my breath visible in the cold air. "Who is it?" I asked, not opening it. A man's voice answered. It was deep and smooth. "Ho, ho, ho, it's Santa Claus. I have a special gift for a little girl." Even at 9, I wasn't stupid. I knew Santa wasn't real, and he certainly wouldn't come to this neighborhood. "Go away," I said, "or I'll call the cops." "Is your mommy home?" the voice asked, ignoring my threat. "She's sleeping." "Go away." There was silence for a long time. I thought he had left. I turned around and walked back toward the living room. That's when I saw him. Our living room had a large window that faced the fire escape. The curtains were thin and ragged. Pressed against the glass was a face. It was a man wearing a Santa suit, but it was filthy, stained with grease and dirt. He wasn't wearing a hat or a beard. His skin was pale, waxy, and he had a smile that stretched too wide across his face. He was holding a crowbar. He tapped on the glass with the metal bar. Tap, tap, tap. He was looking right at Ray and right at Mom. I screamed, "Mom, Ray, wake up!" I shook my mom hard, but she just groaned and swatted me away. The drugs had them too deep. Smash. The glass shattered inward. The cold wind rushed into the room. The man stepped through the window to frame. Boomber frame humming jingle bells under his breath. I didn't wait. I ran to the bathroom, the only room with a lock, and slammed the door. I huddled in the bathtub, pulling the shower curtain over me, pressing my hands over my ears. But I couldn't block out the sounds. I heard Ray shout, confused and groggy. Then a sickening wet thud. Then silence from him. Then my mom started screaming. She screamed my name over and over. "Run, baby, run!" And then her voice was cut short by a gurgling sound that I will never forget as long as I live. Then the apartment went quiet. I lay there in the dark, shaking so violently my teeth chattered. I waited for the bathroom door to break down. I waited for the crowbar, but it never came. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer and closer. Someone must have heard the screams. Heavy boots pounded up the stairs. Police! Anybody in there? I didn't move until an officer kicked open the bathroom door. He saw me in the tub and immediately holstered his weapon. He looked sick. Don't look, kid. Close your eyes, he said as he picked me up. But I looked. I couldn't help it. The living room was painted red. Mom and Ray they were gone. But on the kitchen counter, sitting right in the middle of the chaos, was a dirty gray sock. It was stuffed with cheap, hard candies. I moved in with my dad a few days later. The police never caught the guy. It was just another tragedy in the projects. Just another file in a cabinet. I'm 31 now. I have a family of my own. But every Christmas Eve, I lock every window. I check every lock. And I sit in the dark, listening. Because I know he's still out there. And I know he thinks I still owe him for that gift. My girlfriend, Leia, and I wanted to escape the city for the holidays. We found a listing on Airbnb for a secluded romantic cabin about 3 hours north, deep in the mountains. The photos looked amazing. Rustic wood, a fireplace, and miles of pine forest surrounding it. We arrived on Christmas Eve. It was perfect. The snow was falling heavily, turning the world into a silent white blanket. We unpacked, got a fire going, and opened a bottle of wine. It felt like we were the only two people on Earth. Around 7 p.m., we were startled by a knock at the front door. We looked at each other, confused. We hadn't seen another house for miles. The driveway was a long, winding dirt road that was barely passable in the snow. I went to the door and opened it a crack. Standing on the porch was a woman. She looked normal at first glance. She was wearing a heavy winter coat and a wool hat, but she was shivering violently. "Hi," she said. Her voice was trembling. I'm a friend of the owner. I just live over the ridge. I wanted to make sure you guys had enough firewood." Something was off. Her eyes were dilated, huge black saucers in her pale face, and she kept trying to look past me into the warmth of the cabin. "We're fine, thanks," I said, blocking her view. "Are you sure?" she asked, taking a step closer. "It's going to be a cold night. Can I just come in and check the thermostat?" "The owner asked me to." Leia walked up behind me. She's always had better instincts than I do. "We're fine," Leia said firmly. "Please leave." The woman's expression changed. The concern vanished, replaced by a blank, cold stare. She looked at Leia, then at me. Then she nodded, turned around, and walked off the porch, disappearing into the dark woods. "That was weird," I said, locking his fuel, the deadbolt. "That was terrifying," Leia corrected. We tried to relax, but the mood was broken. We went to bed around 11 p.m. The bedroom was on the second floor, with a balcony overlooking the forest. I fell into a restless sleep. I woke up because the bed shifted. I thought Leia was getting up to use the bathroom. But when I opened my eyes, Leia was frozen next to me. She was gripping my arm so hard her nails were digging into my skin. She was staring at the foot of the bed. I followed her gaze. Standing there, in the moonlight, it was the woman. She wasn't wearing her coat anymore. She was just in a thin t-shirt and jeans, soaking wet from the snow. In her right hand, she held our large kitchen knife, the one we had used to cut steak hours earlier. "I checked the thermostat," she whispered. Then she screamed, a high-pitched animalistic shriek, and lunged. Leia rolled off the bed just as the knife buried itself in the mattress. I scrambled backward, grabbing the heavy bedside lamp. The woman yanked the knife free and slashed at Leia, catching her arm. Blood sprayed onto the white sheets. Adrenaline took over. I swung the lamp with everything I had. It connected with the side of the woman's head with a sickening crunch. She dropped to the floor, the knife clattering away. "Leia, get the keys," I shouted. I stood over the woman, chest heaving. She was lying face down, blood pooling around her head. I thought she was dead. I really did. But then, her shoulders started to shake. A low sound came from her. She was giggling. Slowly and impossibly, as she pushed herself up. She turned to face me. The side of her head was matted with blood. She reached up, touched the wound, and then licked her fingers. She smeared the blood across her cheeks like war paint, her eyes locked on mine. She smiled, a wide, broken smile. "Merry Christmas," she cackled. Then she bolted, not toward us, but out the bedroom door and down the stairs. We heard the front door slam open. We didn't chase her. We barricaded the bedroom door and called the police, but we couldn't leave. The car keys were on stairs, and we could hear her outside. For the next 4 hours until sunrise, she circled the cabin. She would run her hands along the siding, tap on the windows, and laugh. That sound, floating through the snowy woods, it was worse than the attack. When the sun finally rose, the noises stopped. We grabbed the keys and sprinted to the car. The car was covered in bloody handprints. The windshield, the doors, the hood, she had touched every inch of it. The police arrived and followed her footprints into the woods. They went on for about a mile and then just stopped, like she had vanished into thin air. The rental company had never heard of her. No one lived over the ridge. Laya needed 12 stitches. We broke up a few months later. The trauma was too much for us to handle together. But I still can't go to the mountains, and I can't sleep with the door unlocked, even in a high-rise apartment. Those were 3 stories of holiday cheer gone wrong. It reminds us that while we are inside celebrating, there is a cold world outside, and sometimes it wants to come in. If these stories kept you up, or if you just want to support the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me out. And tell me in the comments below, do you lock your bedroom door when you go to sleep? Because after tonight, boy, maybe you should. Stay safe, stay warm, and Merry Christmas.